Hello, my beautiful human. Welcome back to the She Did It Anyway podcast. This is episode 20, and we are talking about trauma. I pulled some paragraphs that I really loved from, I'm going to link it in the show notes, but it was a mental health website. It was talking about the definition of trauma. It talks about what happens after trauma. But one of my favorite things is it highlights that trauma is so different for every single person. So I'm just going to dive right in and read these to you. And then we're going to talk about the things that I have stopped doing. I listed 6 things that I've stopped doing that supported me in healing from past trauma. I want to preface that I really believe that healing is such a journey and it's not this like destination that you arrive at. I also want to highlight that, which we'll go over here, trauma could be anything. Like literally, I think sometimes when we think of trauma, we think of, oh, someone has to experience this like insane death or disaster or like abuse, or it doesn't even have to be that big. It could be a traumatic experience in terms of a very, very, very uncomfortable state that you're in. Maybe it's an uncomfortable conversation. Maybe it's like a something that happened that shook your, like, you don't feel safe anymore, right? Or it harms the way or affects the way you trust others. Like trauma is so different for every single person. And so this is why I love this paragraph that I'm going to read. There's about 3 parts to it that I'm going to read. So let's kick it off. Trauma is the lasting emotion response that often results from living through a distressing event. Experiencing a traumatic event can harm a person's sense of safety, sense of self, and ability to regulate emotions and navigate relationships. It's so true, and it resonates so much with me. Long after the traumatic event occurs, people with trauma can often feel shame, helplessness, powerlessness, and intense fear. This is why sometimes we do not understand how others feel, because this intense feeling of fear or helplessness or shame or powerlessness is going to be just so unique to every single person. And then continues to say, trauma is a term used to describe the challenging emotional consequences. Like, I just want to highlight this word consequences that living through a distressing event can have for an individual. Traumatic events can be difficult to define because the same event may be more traumatic for some people than others. This is why we cannot identify what a trauma is for someone else, or define what a trauma is for someone else. That is just, it's not up to us. We do not decide what's traumatic and what's not. However, traumatic events experienced early in life, such as abuse, neglect, and disrupt attachment, can often be devastating. Equally challenging can be later life experiences that are out of one's control, such as serious accident, being the victim of violence, living through a natural disaster or war, or a suddenly unexpected loss. When thoughts and memories of a traumatic events don't go away and get worse, they may lead to PTSD, which can seriously disrupt a person's ability to regulate their emotion, maintain healthy relationships. So really what I took from this is, 1, we don't get to decide what's traumatic and what's not. 2, the effects of, or the consequences of an event is what leaves us with trauma, and it leaves us feeling the shame, hopelessness, powerlessness, intense fear. In return, can at times cause PTSD, which is post-traumatic stress disorder. Because we will experience so many different things in life that we may call traumatic, I've realized that it can't just go under all one umbrella, and I'll explain to you. I feel like getting pregnant at 23 was so traumatizing for me. I also feel like a car accident that I experienced when I was younger was so traumatizing for me. Coming here from Egypt was so traumatizing for me. My layoff in 2019 was so traumatizing for me. And those were so different. Like, they're just completely different events that triggered different emotions. And so I started thinking about the things that I stopped doing when it came to my healing journey. And I'm going to just dive right in terms of this list of 6. The first thing that I stopped doing is pretending I was okay, and I got help. I would say that I actually didn't start doing this up until I was 23, 24, where I felt like, I just always felt like, oh, I could handle it. I could, like, I don't need help. I'm fine. Like I laugh it off, which we'll talk about in a second. I can deal with this. I can deal with this. And I think that this concept of like therapy or getting help is so looked down upon, or it's just like you get like shamed for it. And if you have mental health issues, it's just like, ooh, this person's unstable, like, which I absolutely hate so, so much. And so I remember even when I was 23 and my cousin recommended I go to therapy, I was like, what? Therapy? Why? I don't have a problem. Like, I'm fine. And immediately once I did start going to therapy, I realized so quickly how much it has helped me, or it helped me cope with the trauma, cope with my emotions, cope with the sense of like not feeling safe, feeling shame, feeling hopelessness, feeling this intense fear, like scared, trust issues, like all of the things that I was dealing with and I felt immediately started to get better, right? Not go away, but get better when I started going to therapy. And so the first thing that I really stopped doing is stopped pretending I was okay and got help. I asked for help. I expressed that I was not okay. And that is something that is really hard for some of us to do because we just feel this like immense amount of shame. The second thing is that I stopped looking for closure from people. This was really hard for me because I have always been that person where I felt like, oh, I needed closure. I need them to recognize what they did was wrong, or that this person hurt me, or that this was not fair. And that stopped me from healing for so long because I just needed that validation from someone else so I can gain quote unquote closure. And it's just so unnecessary because it I realized once I stopped doing that, that I no longer gave those people or that person or that situation power, and I took control of my healing process. And so I really stopped looking for closure. I didn't need apology. I don't need anybody to agree that they did anything wrong. I don't need, this like closure conversation, this last piece. Like, it's just, I don't need it. I need to find closure within myself and, again, not have it be dependent on someone else. Third thing is I stopped making harmful jokes about situations and myself. I use humor to deal with a lot of things. When I'm uncomfortable, when I'm sad, when I'm scared, when I'm hurt, I turn it into humor. It is one of the things that I do as a coping mechanism. I've done it for years and it worked for so long on the outside. On the inside, I was still hurting. The problem was when I started using humor to cope, when I started making jokes about things that were hurtful that have happened in my life, other people didn't take my experiences, my traumatic experiences seriously because they just saw me on the outside laughing about it. And then in return, it would hurt me. Like, it would hurt when people thought it was funny, but at the same time, I'm the one making jokes about it. And so I used to always use humor as this way of coping and dealing with things. And I still do, don't get me wrong. Like, sometimes it's just like I can't even control it. But I realized very quickly that it is also okay to acknowledge when things are not funny. Like, it's just not funny. And right when I did stop doing that, I felt like this sense of respect for myself and respect for my emotions, and the shame started to go away because I really, the only time that I would make jokes was when I felt embarrassed. I felt ashamed of the mistakes that I did or the things that led to that trauma. It it changed everything once I stopped making jokes about things that were serious and that were not funny. And vice versa, like for other people, like when I see my friends start making jokes about things that they've experienced, I'm just like, it's not funny. Like, it's just not funny. And I know that people use humor to heal or to cope, but it's just, I can't support someone in making fun of something that affected them so deeply. I want to support them in love and compassion and empathy. I don't want them to self-sabotage or talk down to themselves and like make fun of themselves. It's just not funny. And so I stopped doing that. I also stopped making the same mistake over and over and over again. This took a long time, and not to say that I don't make the mistakes again, but the same specific mistake, the ignoring the red flags, ignoring like the same red flags. I stopped doing that because it, you know, that quote of like, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me, fool me three times, peace sign, let it rain on you. J. Cole is my favorite. But it's true. Like, okay, I mess up once. Cool. Honestly, I mess up twice. Okay, cool. By the third and fourth and fifth time, I'm like, am I just like doing this on purpose? Is this now, am I just comfortable making this mistake? Why am I allowing this to keep happening? Or why am I doing this same thing over and over again? And I realized that I can stop history from repeating itself if I just took control of the things that I was doing, the decisions that I was making, the red flags that I was intentionally ignoring, and getting to the bottom line of like, why am I ignoring these red flags? Why am I making this mistake over and over and over again? Like, what am I actually hiding? It's like a deeper problem when I'm making the same exact mistake over and over and over again. So I stopped doing that. I stopped thinking that this is just how things are, and I made changes. I have dealt with this my whole life where I've kept people in my life because this is just how they are. People treat me like that because that's just how they are. Like my living situation is like this because this is just how this is. I make this much money. It's just, this is how it is. Like, no, we are in control of our life in a way that like, I can't even express in words. And for whatever reason, it's so hard for us to truly acknowledge how much control we have until it's too late. Until it's like we've ran out of time and it's like now we really can't go back, right? And I am just in this era where I truly feel like I have a select amount of days left on this earth. I don't know what that number is, but I want to make it the best days of my life. And that also means not just accepting things for quote unquote how they are. That's not about being like ungrateful or like unappreciative. It's just, if I don't like something, I have the control to change it. And the last thing is I stopped putting a band-aid on things and became very comfortable being alone. I used to just like quick fix. I used to just do these like quick fixes. You know, I am hurt, so I will journal for the day and move on, like move on, move on, move on. And I realized that I just needed to get really, 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 really comfortable with being uncomfortable, really figure out like, what is the deeper issue? Like, what do I really want? What is really hurting me? And why do I keep like ignoring that? And so putting the band-aid on is just not something that I do anymore. And I have been able to do that by getting very comfortable with being alone, to the point where I love my alone time. I've become such like an introvert, especially when I travel. And I feel like just especially like being a wife and a mom, I value my alone time so much because it's very rarely that I get it. And so when I do have it, even if it's like 20, 30 minutes, I'm just like, okay, this is my alone time. This is my time. And I just cherish that time so much. That way I can pour back into everybody else that's in my life. When I was going through these traumatic experiences, being alone was really scary. And so I would just put a band-aid on and surround myself with people and like go out and just try to stay as busy as possible so I didn't have that alone time. And I realized that more than ever, I needed that. I needed that to heal. And really like figure out what is happening in my life that is hurting me. That is hurting me. The last thing that I wanted to also add here is, I didn't add it on my list, but just acknowledging how I spoke to myself is so, so, so important. Saying things like, I just have bad luck. I just can't figure things out. I'm just not good at these things. I ruin every relationship. I lose every job. I don't save money. I have a bad relationship with money. I have a bad relationship with food. Like, talking negatively does nothing. And I say this to Sebastian all the time. Like, when he's like, oh my God, I'm going to lose this game. How does that support you in any way? Like, what does that do to help you reach your goal, to progress you forward? Like, it does not. It actually holds you back, and it triggers you to like just assume the worst. And I'm not about that life, and I hope you're not either. And so that is like the last thing I would say, like my bonus number 7 for you of what I do to really, really, really help me heal from past trauma and just be a better person to myself. Like, I want to be my own best friend, and I want to treat myself how I treat my best friends and how my best friends treat me. I hope this episode helped you. I am so, so, so honored to be on this healing journey with you and just support you in all aspects. I love you, and I hope that you enjoyed this episode. Love you. Bye. And don't forget, no matter what, she did it anyway.